While the warlords carved up the empire, a forgotten power made a desperate move. In the western capital of Chang'an, the young puppet Emperor Xian, controlled by Dong Zhuo's brutal and incompetent successors, saw his chance. He escaped their custody in a daring flight, enduring starvation and constant pursuit in a desperate bid to return to the old capital of Luoyang. He was the son of heaven, the living symbol of the Han dynasty, yet he was a refugee in his own empire. He sent out a plea to all the warlords of the land to come to his aid, but in this age of ambition, who would answer the call of a powerless emperor? Who would risk war for a cause that offered no land or treasure? While other warlords hesitated, seeing the emperor as a liability, Cao Cao saw a golden opportunity. He marched his army to Luoyang and rescued the emperor from his pursuers. He treated the young sovereign with the utmost respect, providing him with food, comfort, and a new secure capital in his own territory of Zukong. To the world, Cao Cao was the loyal servant of the Han, the only warlord to answer his emperor's call. But in reality, he had just acquired the ultimate political weapon. By controlling the emperor, he could now issue imperial edicts in the emperor's name. His every conquest, his every war, could be framed as a righteous act to pacify the realm. He was no longer just a warlord. He was the prime minister, the legitimate voice of the throne. Cao Cao's masterstroke infuriated his childhood friend and greatest rival, Yuan Shao. As the head of the most prestigious family in the land, Yuan Shao believed it was his right to control the court. From his power base in the north, he had unified the 4 northern provinces, commanding a colossal army of over 700,000 men. He was the most powerful warlord in China, a titan of wealth and military might. In comparison, Cao Cao was a gnat, his territory smaller, his army a fraction of the size. Yuan Shao saw Cao Cao's control of the emperor not as a clever political move, but as an unforgivable act of defiance. The stage was set for a final decisive confrontation. There was only room for one master in the north. Ignoring the advice of his wisest counselors who urged caution, Yuan Shao declared war. He drafted a grand proclamation denouncing Cao Cao as a traitor and a tyrant, and marched his immense army south towards the Yellow River. His plan was simple: to crush Cao Cao with overwhelming numbers. Cao Cao, though vastly outnumbered, was not intimidated. His court was smaller, but it was filled with brilliant minds and unified by a singular purpose. While Yuan Shao's command was plagued by indecision and the conflicting advice of his squabbling advisors, Cao Cao's strategies were swift, decisive, and pragmatic. This would not be a war of numbers, but a war of wits. It was a clash between the prestigious, ponderous might of the old aristocracy and the lean, hungry ambition of a new era. The two armies met at the strategic position of Guandu. For months, they were locked in a brutal stalemate. Yuan Shao built massive siege towers that rained arrows down upon Cao Cao's camp, and his soldiers assaulted the fortifications in relentless waves. Cao Cao's smaller army was pushed to the brink of collapse. His soldiers were exhausted, his supplies were dwindling, and desertions were becoming common. He was losing the war of attrition. Despair began to creep into his camp, and he even considered a full retreat. He was being slowly and methodically crushed by Yuan Shao's superior numbers. Victory seemed impossible, and his entire life's ambition was on the verge of being annihilated in the mud and blood of Guandu. Just as all hope seemed lost, a miracle arrived in the dead of night. An advisor named Su Yu, a longtime friend of Cao Cao who served Yuan Shao, defected to his camp. Su Yu was a greedy and arrogant man, and after being insulted by Yuan Shao one too many times, he decided to betray his master. He brought with him the single most important piece of intelligence of the entire war. He told Cao Cao the location of Yuan Shao's main supply depot, a place called Wu Shao, which held all the grain and provisions for his massive army of 700,000 men. Crucially, Su Yu revealed that the depot was only lightly guarded. He had just handed Cao Cao the key to his enemy's lifeline. While his advisors argued that it was a trap, Cao Cao immediately recognized the truth in Su Yu's words. This was his one and only chance. He gathered a small, elite force of 5,000 cavalry, leaving the main camp under the command of his best generals with orders to defend it to the last man. He disguised his troops by dressing them as Yuan Shao's soldiers, and under the cover of darkness, personally led them on a daring, silent raid deep into enemy territory. It was the ultimate gamble. If he failed, his main camp would be overrun and his army destroyed. But if he succeeded, he could cut the head off the serpent and win the entire war in a single night. Cao Cao's raiders descended upon Wu Shao like ghosts in the night, catching the defenders completely by surprise. They set fire to the massive stockpiles of grain and supplies. The dry autumn air turned the depot into a raging inferno, a pillar of fire and smoke that lit up the night sky and could be seen from the main battlefield dozens of miles away. The flames of Wu Shao were a beacon of doom for Yuan Shao's army. When reinforcements arrived, Cao Cao's elite force, fighting with the desperation of cornered tigers, defeated them as well. In a single brilliant stroke, Cao Cao had not just destroyed his enemy's food, he had destroyed their will to fight. When news of the fire at Wu Shao reached Yuan Shao's main camp, it triggered a catastrophic collapse. The news was confirmed by the terrifying glow on the horizon. Panic spread like a plague through the ranks. Generals, seeing the cause was lost, began to surrender or defect to Cao Cao. The soldiers, leaderless and knowing their food supply was gone, simply broke and fled. The largest and most powerful army in China dissolved into a terrified mob. Yuan Shao himself was forced to flee with only a handful of bodyguards, abandoning his vast army, his peerless reputation, and his dreams of becoming emperor. His pride and indecision had led him to utter ruin. The Battle of Guandu was one of the most decisive victories in Chinese history. With a force of less than 70,000, Cao Cao had annihilated an army 10 times its size. This single battle cemented his reputation as a military genius of the highest order. In the years that followed, he swept through the northern plains, consolidating his power and eliminating the last remnants of Yuan Shao's clan. He was now the undisputed, absolute master of the north. Far to the south, Liu Bei, who had taken refuge with Yuan Shao after losing Su province, was now a refugee once more. His enemy was no longer just a clever warlord. He was a colossus who controlled half the empire and the son of heaven himself.